Episode 14, Greed is Power. Luigi took a step back, crushing a moldy mushroom that had been discarded upon the floor of the abandoned item shop. Outside, chaos still reigned, with shouts and screams and the sounds of engines all mixing together. Right this second, Cobal could be being dragged into one of the Koopa cruisers. And yet, at this moment, Luigi could do nothing but stand and stare at the one face he had never expected to see again. Waluigi raised one of his eyebrows.
"Lookin' kinda skinny, Luigi," he snickered. "Even worse than usual. At this rate you might even catch up with me. Wahaha."
He laughed gleefully, seemingly unaware of the situation outside. Luigi glared at him fiercely. He didn't have time for his purple-clad rival's antics.
"Gee. Good to see you, Waluigi," he said politely. "I know you're probably aching for a tennis match since we haven't had one in decades, but not right now."
He was inching towards the dusty glass door. With surprising speed, Waluigi darted behind him, blocking his path to the door.
"What, am I stupid or something? Why would I be wanting to play tennis when there's a million Koopas drafting people outside?"
Luigi sighed. He never knew quite what to think when it came to Waluigi. The man was basically a complete mystery to everyone in the Mushroom Kingdom. There was no way he had time to deal with his weird, random nature right now.
"Listen, Waluigi,"
Luigi said. He was going to be frank here. There was no use wondering what Waluigi, or his brother Wario, for that matter, had been up to in the past years. He wasn't even going to waste time wondering why Waluigi had dragged him into this old shop in the first place. Cobal's freedom was at stake.
"Waluigi, I need to go,"
he pleaded. He didn't want this to come to blows, that would take far too long to settle.
"The Koopas took a friend of mine. I have to get him back, before they take him away to who knows where."
Waluigi rolled his eyes.
"I thought you were supposed to be the smart one,"
he said dryly, scratching his head as he looked out the window. A trio of Koopa Troopas were chasing down a runaway Toad, finally tackling him to the ground.
"That's an entire army of Koopas. Unless you magically can produce a star, it's game over for you."
He chuckled to himself, as if an extremely entertaining thought had just come to him.
"Hey, I wonder if they'd end up drafting you, too? That would be just too good for words."
The entire store shook, the dusty bottles of long-expired syrup on the counters shaking. One of Bowser's gigantic new battleships was passing over them again. Luigi sighed, sitting down on the counter as Waluigi gazed at him with crossed arms, still blocking his way out. He had to accept reality. Here he was, out of practice and not a power-up in sight. There was probably a whole castle's worth of Koopas out on the streets right now. Fighting them would not only end with him getting captured, it would alert the Koopa Empire to his presence even more than freeing Toad Town would. The news would spread to every corner of the Empire until it reached the ears of Bowser himself. Then the full force of the Empire would descend upon the Mushroom Kingdom, and snuff out its chance of freedom forever. Luigi heard rockets outside as yet another Koopa cruiser took off. Cobal was undoubtedly gone now. He was no doubt struggling with all his might, yes. But his fight right now was out of his hands. He hoped with all his heart that his training, as brief as it had been, would be some use to him. A wave of despair threatened to overwhelm him, but Luigi pushed it back. He was not useless. He had helped Cobal in every way possible. He had given him the skills that would help him survive. Cobal was not the sort of person who would simply lie down and admit defeat. Luigi slid off the counter and walked towards Waluigi.
"You done?"
Waluigi asked, tilting his head to one side and staring at him.
"Why? Yes,
Luigi replied as he approached Waluigi, looking up to meet the taller man in the eye.
Now it's time for you to answer some of my questions. Why are you here?
Waluigi smirked.
Business as usual.
He shrugged.
It was a stroke of good luck I found you. My bro is going to be hyped.
He walked past Luigi, going behind the item shop's counter. As Luigi watched, Waluigi pushed one of the syrup jars aside before smashing his fist against a button that had been hidden behind it. There was a low rumble as part of the wall slid back to reveal a hidden passage. Waluigi looked back with a triumphant expression.
Cool, right?
He asked.
Yeah.
Luigi said suspiciously, coming over to investigate the secret doorway. It led to a steep staircase going down, lit dimly by faint electronic lights. What was this place? Had Waluigi built it? Why would he have a secret passage in the back of an old item shop, anyway? Waluigi walked through the hidden door down a few steps before gesturing to Luigi to follow him.
Come on,
he urged.
If you actually want to do something, this is the place to go.
As Luigi stepped into the hidden passage, he had mixed feelings. This was Waluigi he was dealing with. A notorious liar and cheater. What if this was all a trap? Wario and Waluigi could be doing it based on their petty grudge. Or the Koopa Empire could have paid them a sizable amount of coins to bring him in. Still, he had to admit it was a better choice than facing the troops outside. While Wario and Waluigi had never been model citizens, they had never gotten along with Bowser either. He remembered the only time they had ever teamed up, at the night of the final match in the Peach Dome tennis tournament. The criminal's bomb launcher had malfunctioned and launched one of the explosives right at Bowser's hot air balloon. The Koopa King had never worked with them since. Waluigi pressed a button in the wall which caused the secret door to slide shut. Instantly, the already dim staircase became several shades darker. Waluigi began walking down the steps with Luigi following him. As they went deeper down the staircase, Luigi began to hear the sound of rushing water coming from somewhere near him. Eventually, Waluigi reached a door and pushed it open. Luigi was instantly hit by the unmistakable smell of the sewers.
You know my bro, he's not the kind of guy to live anywhere clean.
Waluigi sighed dismissively. Luigi silently nodded as he shut the door behind him and began to follow Waluigi through the sewer tunnel. The sewers were the same as he always remembered them, dimly lit by the lights installed by the city workers more than 60 years ago. As he walked on the stone path that ran alongside the foul-smelling water, he saw several strange black shapes bounce by. Luigi cringed. Mushroom City never used to have this much fuzzies. Him and his brother had always kept the sewers free of uninvited guests. He heard the clink of a sidestepper's claws on the opposite path to his left. Mushroom City really had to be suffering now that it was deprived of its two greatest plumbers. Waluigi walked so fast Luigi could scarcely keep up with him. He turned right, then left, then right again, zigzagging through tunnels and pipes as if he had had the entire layout memorized. Even Luigi, who had been down these sewers more times than he could count, had no idea at all where they were going. Thankfully, Waluigi seemed to know the way. He hoped. The tall and lanky man finally stopped before a large wooden door. Interestingly, this area of the sewers smelled a bit differently, almost as if somebody had sprayed some air freshener around it. Unfortunately, that didn't do much to help Luigi's poor nostrils, since now instead of smelling sewage, he was smelling a very, very strong scent of garlic. This door could only belong to one person.
Well, how about we go on and say hello?
Waluigi asked, swinging the door open wide and pushing Luigi in. Instantly, Luigi was hit by a blaze of light. Everything in the room before him was gold. pure, glittering gold. 1 second he was in the sewers. The next second, he was in a palace. He blinked his eyes, trying to adjust to the light of the glittering chandeliers. Unfortunately, despite the room's luxurious appearance, the scent of garlic was still very strong in the air. The room was crowded with thugs and lowlifes of all kinds. Especially prominent were those skinny kinds of shy guys Luigi knew were called bandits, but there were members of nearly every race in the Mushroom Kingdom milling about in the huge, extravagant room. Some of them were counting gold coins, throwing them into colossal treasure chests, while others were punching bags set up in a corner of the room. Some were chatting each other about various criminal acts, while others were sitting at desks going over records. Records, no doubt, of various illegal activities. Luigi walked down the red carpet with a mixture of awe and fear. Several of the criminals seemed to be looking at him in the same way. Most of them clearly knew who he was. He had obviously stumbled into the center of a full-fledged criminal organization. And he knew exactly who was at the top. At the end of the red carpet, atop a short flight of steps, was a massive wooden desk piled with treasure. Several other bits of gold and jewels were strewn messily around it. At the back of the desk was a gigantic golden chair that was nothing short of a throne. Although Luigi was certainly not staring at the chair right now. He was staring at the man on top it. A short, fat, mustachioed man was lounging on it lazily, picking his nose. Dominating the entire wall behind the desk was an enormous picture of Wario, standing on top of a huge pile of treasure. When Wario saw Luigi, his eyes bugged out and he leaped nearly 2 feet into the only to come crashing down hard onto his seat's red cushion.
"What's this?"
he growled.
"You're dead." "Hi, Wario,"
Luigi stammered, feeling intimidated not only by the man's formidable strength but also the incredible amount of wealth and power he had obviously accumulated over the years.
How are things?" "Just take a look around you."
Wario laughed, getting off his chair and walking around his desk to approach Luigi.
"Things are great. But who cares? I want to talk about you right now."
He walked up towards Luigi and poked him in the chest. Nervously, Luigi took a step back.
"Bruo,"
came the nasally voice of Waluigi behind him. Luigi turned around to see Waluigi running up the aisle, knocking several crooks out of the way before arriving at his side in a huff.
"Found him in the city, trying to pick a fight with the Koopas,"
he exclaimed between breaths.
"Looks like my boy's back in action, eh?"
"Shut up!" Wario growled, punching Waluigi in the chest. The force of the punch was so strong it sent Waluigi flying across the room, slamming into a bespectacled Koopa sitting at a desk and scattering his papers. Completely ignoring the fate of his brother, Wario turned back to Luigi and began to pace back and forth before his desk, flexing his fingers.
"All right, listen up, Luigi,"
he said, with an angry glint in his eye that set Luigi on edge.
"Tell me the story. All of it. What happened that night at Toad Town?"
While recounting the worst day of his life was the last thing Luigi wanted to do right now, he thought it best to stay on Wario's good side. If he could get the beefy criminal as an ally, that would be a definite step in overthrowing the Empire. So, Luigi told Wario the story of the Battle of Toad Town, feeling his stomach contort with shame as he told of how he foolishly allowed himself to be captured by Cammy, and his eyes growing wet as he told of Mario's tragic end. All through the story, Wario seemed to be getting more and more angry. When he got to the part where the bullet bills hit Mario, Wario finally lost it, slamming his fist so hard on his desk that the table split clean in two.
"It's just not fair,"
he yelled, his loud voice echoing through the Golden Hall. He stomped on one of the halves, further demolishing the piece of furniture.
"He was my #1 rival, and Bowser took him from me.
Wario whirled around, facing Luigi with a furious face. At least, Luigi could tell, the anger was not directed at him.
Do you know how it felt those first few years, Luigi?
He half-roared, stomping the ground for emphasis.
For 5 entire years I did nothing wicked, illegal, or mean-spirited at all. What was the fun in it without Mario? Why compete in a kart race if there's nobody to sabotage? Why crash a party when there's nobody's party you want to crash?
He began pacing around the room again, even more frantically than before. To Luigi, he looked about ready to snap. He severely hoped Wario wasn't about to go on some wild rampage.
Bowser's goons were all over the place.
He ranted.
Since I was unaccounted for, I was a wanted man. Everyone wanted to catch me. If I wanted to buy a yacht, I'd have 10 airships chasing me before I could pay the last coin. If I wanted to buy a mansion, I'd get bombs dropped through my bedroom windows. What was the point of getting rich if you couldn't spend it?
Wario clapped his hands together, a sound that hurt Luigi's ears.
So that's why I made this entire thing,
he said, his voice getting lower as he threw out his hands, indicating the room filled with criminals. Luigi saw they were all watching Wario now with awe. All except for Waluigi, who looked more annoyed.
My very own organization. I'm gonna make that Bowser pay, Luigi. I'm gonna crush him and all his kids and castles and airships. Then I'm going to loot the royal treasury and take it easy.
Despite the frankly quite frightening nature of Wario's rant, to say nothing of the dubious criminal activities he was obviously conducting with this organization, Luigi in fact felt quite relieved. He even felt a little exited.
That's great, Wario,
he said humbly, coming up next to the muscular man.
I'm working to bring down Bowser, too. Maybe we could work together. Exactly.
Wario grinned, with a greedy glint in his eye.
On one condition. All the gold old King Koopa's been hiding away belongs to me. Let's make that a deal.
Luigi nodded. Even though some of Bowser's treasure likely belonged to the Mushroom Kingdom and other nations, they were still a small price to pay for the world's freedom. Wario threw back his head and laughed.
Now that's the kind of answer I was hoping for, green guy,
he exclaimed.
Hey, Waluigi!
He yelled down into the hall.
Yeah?
Waluigi asked, scratching his head.
Get this wimp some garlic. We're gonna party tonight, and crush Koopas tomorrow. I think I'll pass,
Luigi said weakly. While he obviously did not enjoy Wario's company, it was a necessary sacrifice for the Mushroom Kingdom. This huge criminal network would be a huge asset to his goal. Slowly but surely, the path to Bowser's defeat was being revealed. How much more would it take before they were powerful enough to take him on? Luigi didn't know. But for now, he was more concerned about a more immediate problem. Was his young Yoshi protege all right?